So first in the wastewater process was to go through the winery and teach everybody that we wanted to reduce the use of water overall, and we certainly wanted to waste less. We wanted to try to use it twice and then recycle it.
Yeah.
So you go through the winery and you provide dustpans and brooms to clean the floor first before you're using a big 1-inch hose to clean the floor. Then when we do use water to rinse tanks, we want to try to take that water and use that water to rinse the floors. So that's reducing the amount of water that we use. Then the next thing was to reduce the amount of solids going down the system. Because the more solids I have in the system, the longer it takes for me to clean this water up, because it has food basically.
Right.
So gathered all the piping together from the facility and brought it to one location down below at what's called sump 3, and I run all the water over a parabolic screen. Anything that won't fit through the parabolic screen goes down a chute and lands in a burlap sack. If I find that there are things showing up in there, I just take the burlap sack and walk around the winery and ask people, does this belong to you? And of course they got the message real quick, so I don't end up with too many solids in my system now. Once it goes through the screen, it goes through a couple of buffering tanks down below that give me room for expansion in case more than one sump kicks on at a time. After it's gone through those, and those have a float valve and it kicks on, and it sends the water to these two big tanks here. These two tanks used to be for fire protection. Some 20 some odd years ago somebody made them, put them in to have fire protection for the winery. But then when we bought the place now 6 years ago, I called the fire chief, had him come out and go through the whole property and look at my fire protection. He said I had, everything was great, I have all these new fire hydrants, etc. And I asked him, well, what about those big tanks up on the hill? And he said, no, we would never use those. We don't need those. Those are just there because somebody was mad at somebody 20 years ago. So I've made them part of the system, so I send all the water to these tanks, and this gives me time. So the water spends about 20 to 30 days going through these two tanks. During that time I get anaerobic digestion starts and also settling out. So whatever suspended solids for the most part has 20 or 30 days in here to settle out to the bottom. And then I just pull stuff right off the bottom of these tanks and actually go put it on my compost pile, because I feed my compost pile to get it to heat up. Yeah. And of course the stuff right off the bottom of these tanks is just great stuff. Totally. So that goes into there. Once it overflows and goes through these two tanks, it then starts its trip down the hill and goes through what we call trickle towers. And now originally I had all kinds of designs and ideas, but then we went to a professional and they did a design. It was gorgeous, but it was mostly steel and plastic and cost about $100,000. So we built our trickle towers out of old barrel racks and wood slats and fill them with plants. And what happens, that trickle tower grows a film on it. It's called filamentous fungi. And this filamentous fungi looks like just black sludge sort of hanging on the side, and it's very thick, and you can take it and hold it in your hand and squeeze it like a sponge. But that filamentous fungi consumes compounds, and my #1 compound is sugar. So it consumes the sugar out of the water as it's going through the trickle towers. That also puts oxygen back in the water because of all the trickling action that goes on. So the water, when it comes out of the winery, has what's called BOD, biological oxygen demand. And I've got to eliminate or reduce that greatly. And the main thing there is removing the solids, removing the sugars, and putting oxygen back into the water. And so as we go through, I'll show you, when we get down lower, I'll show you some trickle towers and then the reclamation pond, where I do all the mixing of the pond and aeration via gravity and waterfalls. Goes through that first trickle tower you see on the outside of that big tank. Remember, there's two big tanks up there. Yeah. Goes through that trickle tower, and then it's all gravity. Comes down here. This is gravity, makes it come out of the top of this. Comes down through here. This is the filamentous fungi I'm talking about. Yeah. Big thick stuff. Is kind of like carpet, like a big sponge. And so it consumes sugar. And of course sugar consumes oxygen in my water, so I need to get the sugar out. So all I do is stand this here, let the water run through it. Nature takes its course and cleans the water up. And you'll notice we have no smell. No, I mean, you go to any winery and ask them to show you their wastewater, and they're going to ask you for your badge. Right. I will invite people. And again, we just mix all these different plants in with the system. They all consume excess nutrients. And then it goes down this spot here. It overflows there, and we'll see it again down below. So the way this wetland works, there's a stream, that goes back and forth and back and forth, taking up the longest run that I could create in the space that I had here. The whole thing is full of wetland plants. These plants consume excess nutrients, and as wetland plants, they'll take oxygen right out of the atmosphere and actually put oxygen back in the water. Some of them, the rushes in particular, will actually pull heavy metals if I had heavy metals.
Wow.
But for the most part, I'm consuming excess nitrogen, phosphorus, and that sort of thing. These plants do it. So this is the polishing that happens, and it goes on continuously. As I move the water around, I run part of it through here. The other comes out in the two waterfalls at the very ends, and that gives me my mixing, and the waterfalls, of course, saturate the water with air and oxygen. So my DO in the pond is probably somewhere between 3 and 5. I have a requirement of being at least 1 before I can land apply, and I'm 3 or 4 times that. My BOD, I have a requirement of getting below 80 parts per million. I'm probably at less than 10, almost immeasurable at this point, and will be all through the summer. The BOD, when it comes out of the winery, is about 2,000 parts per million.
Wow.
So between the settling tanks, the trickle towers, the wetland, and the pond itself, it cleans itself up real well, especially with all the things that are going. And so we end up with a number of things. One, this is about 5 million gallons of water that I get to recycle and use again. So it's kind of like I'm making water, which is kind of like making money, only better.
Yeah.
You can't drink money.
Right.
The vines can't drink the money. So I get that water. It's that much water I'm not pulling out of the aquifer or the river. It's that much more water I'm not running through pumps and the power to run those pumps. And then I get the biodiversity here, which of course, in being biodynamic, is really nice. And I get the pleasure of being able to come down here and enjoy all the water birds and all kinds of cool stuff down here.